After knowing the supreme and smart design of human structures and functions, you might want to know how they come into being. Who has designed and made such sophisticated and precise organs? We cannot avoid the question. Any truth-seeking person would admit that the extremely delicate organs and structures are not produced naturally or accidentally. For instance, if someone gives you a top-class camera and tells you it is a natural one without designer or manufacturer, do you think his words are scientific and acceptable? The human body, which is even more delicate, accurate, flexible and practical, must have a supremely wise and capable creator behind it. On a spring Sunday morning in 1954, I saw a young stranger sitting in the chamber of a church. When we started to talk, I knew that he was a student at Peking Union Medical College. He said to me, "Since I studied anatomy and physiology, I have felt the human body is really a wonder. It is not possible to understand it unless we interpret the wonder with a God." He came to the church to seek an answer. The wonder of this young man is not the only example. I remember that when I was studying anatomy and physiology in school, some students surrounded our physiology teacher and kept asking him questions. Finally, the teacher, annoyed by so many questions, told us, "Please stop the questions because they will lead to religion in the end." Because of the special political background at the time, the teacher's warning silenced all the students. But his warning impressed me deeply and remained in my memory till today. My thought at that time was that the teacher was right because all the things were created by the God. Though he was not a Christian, he had to admit the truth, and the further probe into the human body mysteries, part of the universe mysteries, would definitely lead to the existence of the God, religion, in the end. Otherwise, it would be impossible to explain the wonders of the human body. The Bible says, "For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." 1:20 Romans 1, was the teacher demonstrating his scientific spirit? No. The scientific spirit means the truth and boldly pursuit of the truth without avoiding any controversy. The teacher knew very clearly that one more step forward would lead to the God, but he dared not move on to the path towards the truth. Instead, he asked his students to stop there. It has shown that many people refuse to admit the existence of God not because they don't have the scientific spirit but because of the social pressure, individual consideration for their interest and prospect, just as what the teacher was doing at that time. Nevertheless, the existence of the God would not change. And we cannot live in such considerations for the reality forever. One day in the future, when we have to face the ultimate choice, we will have to face the Supreme Master who has created the universe and the human beings. The Bible says, "And as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment." If we don't accept the immoral God now, we have no excuse when it comes to the day. When we talk about the origin of all things in the universe, some young people often ask, "You have said the humans are created by the God, then who has created the God?" The analogizing logics seem to be reasonable. But it is not true. Because the God is the creator instead of the created, you can't link these together. The table is made by the carpenter. But you cannot say the carpenter and the table have the same origin. Human beings' understand of the God is only limited to the enlightenment from the God to the humans. Otherwise, humans cannot understand the mystery of God's nature. The God says, "I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, saith the Lord, which is, and which was, and which is to come, the Almighty." Exodus 3 verse 14 and Revelation 1 verse 8. For the God, there is only the eternality, and there is no time, beginning or ending. Even in the scientific field, too many analogizing questions won't be tolerated. One scholar was talking about the belief in the God with his students. One student asked suddenly and proudly, "Where does the universe come from?" The scholar answers, "The universe is created by the God." The student continued to ask, "Who has created the God?" The scholar answered, "The God is Alpha and Omega and I am not created." The student said, "This is not scientific at all." The scholar then asked the student, where does the earth come from? The student answered, the earth comes from the sun. The scholar continued to ask, where does the sun come from? The student answered, the sun comes from the galaxy. The scholar asked again, where does the galaxy come from? The student hesitated and answered, the galaxy comes from the nature. The scholar continued to ask, where does the nature come from? The student couldn't answer this question and said in anger, the nature is the nature and comes naturally. The scholar then laughed, this is not scientific at all. So we can conclude that the scientific answers are not scientific. Another example is that the sciences tell people that substances are composed of the molecules. Then what are the molecules composed of? The molecules are composed of the atoms. But what are the atoms composed of? They are composed of the electrons, protons and neutrons. Then what are the electrons, protons and neutrons composed of? Till now, we cannot find an answer to this question. The atomic physicists are now working hard to find the elementary particle. They are called basic particles because the scientists don't expect the substances to be divided limitlessly. So they believe that one day they will find the ultimate component, the elementary particle. Of course, the scientists will not ask such question of, what is something composed of? This is the extremity and everything ends here. The materialists claim that the universe is limitless and that the materials are eternal and can be divided limitlessly, etc. They are simply the groundless conclusion of the philosophers. And there is an extremity in their logics, the materials. They say that the materials are alpha and omega but can't tell where the materials come from. Now let's have a look at the math. All numbers come from 1, followed by 2, 3. You can't ask what the 1 is because 1 is 1, and not other numbers. It means that 1 is the origin of all numbers. The greatest creator has created all things and the greatest creator is the origin of them. It will be meaningless to ask where the greatest creator comes from.